saw that Jacob was putting up a fight, he played a little nasty, he played a little dirty, and he wrenched his hip. Vayomer shelacheni ki ala shachar, vayomer lo ashalechacha ki im berachetani. The angel said, "Let me go." And Jacob said, "Not until you bless me." Vayomer elav ma shemecha, vayomer Yaakov. The angelic being said, "What's your name?" And Jacob said, "Jacob." Vayomer lo Yaakov ye'amer od shemecha ki im Yisrael ki sari ta'im Elohim v'im anashim v'tizal. And the angelic being said, "Not anymore, your name is not Jacob, rather you shall be called Yisrael, Israel," which means that you have struggled with divine and human beings, and you have prevailed. Vayish'al Yaakov, vayomer nekitana shemecha, vayomer lamazeh, tish'al yishemi, vayivarech oto sham. Jacob asked, "Tell me your name," but he said, "You must not ask my name." And thus ended this mysterious encounter. It is now my pleasure to call on Reverend Eric Goode. I met Reverend Goode in the context of a time, an incredibly fraught time, both for our black neighbors over these past many months of really standing up against and seeking allies to, in the fight, in the struggle, in the wrestle against systemic racism, and in the wake of an immediate event that also caused pain in the Jewish community. And at that time, a new friend of mine and an old friend of Reverend Goode's, Bishop Felton, called us together and said it's time to come together and talk and rekindle, in the spirit of Hanukkah, rekindle the spirit of collaboration and understanding that should exist between our peoples and our communities. I was sitting in our first conversation 6 feet away at a table at a seminar that was posted to YouTube, 6 feet away from Reverend Goode, and I said, "Man, I gotta get closer to this guy." Now, we haven't been able to get physically closer because of social distancing and the pandemic, but we have grown closer to our learning together. I had the pleasure of being on a panel with him and with some of his colleagues that he convened in honor of his 34th birthday this past week. It was on what is the role of houses of worship, and specifically the church, what is the role in a time that is polarized? And I learned so much from you. And it is my pleasure now to introduce you, sadly virtually, I can't wait till they can meet you in person, sadly virtually, but certainly through your teachings, to our Out of Israel community. Reverend Goode, it is a pleasure to share a pulpit with you, and so I'm going to turn it over to you at this time.
What a beautiful privilege, a wonderful moment that is mine to be here, to be enriched by this expression of worship in this beautiful sacred space. I have certainly been invigorated during this moment, and to Rabbi Yanov and my newfound friend, I'm not good with names, so you're going to have to say it again. Markowitz. Thank you, my friend, and just for your warm hospitality. It's a pleasure to be here. Rabbi Yanov is going to be with me on the third Sunday of this month, December the 20th. He will come and share with our faith community, and I'm looking forward to that occasion. The ultimate wrestling match. The story of Jacob is about a man who spent much of his life wrestling in conflict. From conception, he has been in some type of wrestling match. This story, which occurs after him crossing the Jabbok, is a culmination of this struggle. It is inspired by fear that he was in danger. After he heard that Esau wanted to meet him, the last time he saw his brother had threatened to take his life because Jacob had cheated him out of his birthright and had taken the blessing. So, quite naturally, Esau said, I'm going to get you. Now it's time for reuniting. And Jacob is fearful. Jacob is scared. And he begins to have a conversation with God during that moment because of fear for his life. He is, in this section, in this episode, all by himself. He is alone. There are times when, like Jacob, each of us will find ourselves alone. This pandemic continues to be a most challenging crisis for each of us as we find ourselves in a space of spiritual wrestling. Being alone can be depressing, but it could also be developmental. Pope Francis, in his latest book, shares this insight. The basic rule of a crisis is that you don't come out of it the same. If you get through it, you come out better or worse, but never the same. In this episode, we will see Jacob emerge from this experience a changed individual. For Jacob, this was a time of spiritual enrichment. Jacob is by himself, and he is made to wrestle with a divine being. Now, the identity of this person has been largely questioned. There are those who suggested that this was an angel. Others have speculated it was a demon. However, we just don't know who this being is. He's tussling with this person, and he's tussling with him through until the breaking of day. Jacob is commanded, let me go. The divine being says to Jacob, let me go. The day is breaking, and I've got to get out of here. And Jacob says, he makes this declaration, I will not let you go until you bless me. The angelic being says, well, what is your name? This divine being, what is your name? Jacob responds. Then Jacob says, well, since you want to know my name, what's your name? And there is a refusal. The divine being said, well, why do you want to know my name? And the divine being says, well, not only can you not know my name, but I'll need to tell you that your name is going to change. You will no longer be identified as Jacob, but you will be identified as Israel because you have wrestled with divine beings, with God and humans, and have prevailed. Jacob's name being changed is an invitation for him to see himself differently. Jacob, his name suggested at one time one of not so good character, always seeking to find ways to get out of a situation or finding ways to maneuver out of a situation. To the contrary, this encounter changed the way Jacob saw himself. He could no longer cheat his way out of this situation. I must suggest that each of us will undergo a transformation where we see ourselves differently, when we see ourselves in new ways. The changing of the name reflected a transition from someone cold and callous to a person of character and courage. Once we see ourselves differently, then others will see us differently. Jacob wanted to know the name of the divine being, but was refused. But he is blessed at that moment. Beforehand, Jacob took the blessing from Esau, but now he is being blessed with a blessing with the divine, by a divine being, and this is something that far outweighs the blessing that any other blessing he could ever have. He gets up and he leaves Peniel. Before he names the place Peniel, before he leaves. It was not uncommon to memorialize an area as a means of remembering what happened in that space. This pandemic will forever be etched in the memory of many. For some, this time will be remembered as being most traumatizing year, as we have watched loved ones die, sickness pervade the land, injustice in our world. For others, we will recall the isolation and the feeling of depression. Nevertheless, there will be those who will share their stories of how in this moment they found liberation and wholeness. Even despite the being alone, they found liberation. They found a sense of newness, even in the midst of this most tumultuous time. After this episode, he leaves that place. He leaves with a limp, because you do know, because Jacob was adamant. Jacob refused to give up. He was touched. His hip was dislocated. He leaves changed, transformed. Before he came to this moment, he was scared. Before he came to this moment, before this experience, Jacob was scared. There was a note of anxiety. Didn't know what to face. He didn't know what would happen. But after this experience, he leaves with courage as he prepares to go and face his brother. This pandemic has been tough for many of us. As we watch many die, so many other things, calamities. But there is good news. This pandemic, the restrictions will be lifted. What will happen when you come out of this experience? What new courage, what new challenges await? Like Jacob, we may need to reconcile with some people. Like Jacob, there may be new ventures that we want to take on. Like Jacob, there may be a whole new world of discovery. It may be that this pandemic is igniting for us an imagination where we can envisage a world that is changed from the nightmare that it can be into the dream of God. And so, if I could leave you with one defining message for this talk today, and that is this: that we will face defining moments, both now and even in the future, which will shape the trajectory of the rest of our life. May we leave, once this pandemic is over, may we stand and go forth with the courage to face the new possibilities that exist. In the name of the Lord, in the name of our loving and liberating God, amen.
Reverend Goode, the words that we say when we hear such inspiring words of Torah and teaching are, Yasher Koach.